Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. This car will not have a removable front end, but I'm going to miss how handy it used to be to pull off the front end and service the engine by just sitting on the tire. Today we did lots of dreaming. I got kind of derailed working on other projects. I was doing some spray painting and other things that were taking up time, so I decided to do a little look into the future. I got some work to do for sure. On the 72 Nova, turbo, twin turbo, who knows, LS project. So we finished up the drive shaft loop and painted it, and in about another 47 hours, that paint will be dry. Still wet to the touch, I got fingerprints on it, but oh well. I was kind of studying the project from here back, and this is a nice support on both sides of the floor welded to my frame connectors. I'm going to run 2-inch flat bar right up around the floor and connect both sides, so that way there is less of a void. There's a void between that loop and this loop, and the floor has been modified right there. This is stock floor. So I may be, overcompensating because this was my first choice, and like I mentioned, if this had aftermarket floors, I would run this probably full length. I do not want to be visited by the drive shaft. I spent a lot of years racing with a manual transmission. You get used to breaking stuff and the resulting carnage. But I am lucky. I've only dented the floor, but when I had my Lenco and all the horsepower, I was sitting next to that. Exactly 10 years ago today, I posted a picture of the one I just finished building. Pretty interesting. I got measuring the rear end housing and got a little freaked out at first, and then I remembered that Nova bodies are offset a 1/2 inch to one side, and whoever built this car figured it out, much like I did when I put the rear end in the 71. Basically, you center the tires in the wheel wells, and the brackets fall where they may. So this rear end, the brackets from center are a 1/2 inch different, but it's correct and it's square in the car, and it'll be fine. If I didn't tell you that, you'd never know the difference. But if you're working on a Nova 3rd gen, however they had the assembly jig, they're off a 1/2 inch in the back. So if you put on wide tires on the stock Nova, stock leaf spring Nova, one tire is going to hit the fender well, the other one's going to clear. I have about 1.1/8 clearance here, and radials don't grow a lot, but I'm probably going to improve this just a little bit. And the big issue is the back, where it curves back toward the tire. I'm going to straighten it out and actually run it down this way, just like the 71 is all done. That's how we got big tires under it. I did some measuring on the wheelie bars that I mentioned in yesterday's video, and I forgot to mention that the wheelie bars came out of that same Tot Sportsman Buick that the Turbo 400 yoke that I installed on the drive shaft did. So I'm going to have 2 pieces of that car. I really like that car. It was a fresh build at the same time I showed up with my orange car. We were running almost the same ET, but his car was way nicer and brand new. And then 10 years later, a friend of mine ended up owning it, and that's how I got all the parts. So there are 21 inches or so on center, so when I run this bracket over to here, the lower bracket's going to head in here somewhere, so that's going to work out well. And I'll have to come up with an upper mount. I always weld on just a couple 1/4 inch bolts on the top of the housing to clamp the brake line to. I've noticed a little weepage over the 5 years that I've owned it. I went to drain it today. There's nothing in it. So this will be a nice spare when I clean it up. It's a 389 Detroit Locker NASCAR housing. I know it's NASCAR because I've bought a bunch of them. It has the oil pump connection there. You can't really see it because it's all dark, but it's there, trust me. The track locator works. That's what centers the rear end side to side. This is just a direct thread piece of tubing, and I wouldn't trust it probably. It's pretty long because the brackets are so wide, but I have a perfect opportunity to make a wishbone connected here and to each of the back bolts, and I actually found 2 pieces of tubing that'll slide inside each other. That's how it makes it pivot. So I'm going to go ahead and build a wishbone while I'm working back here. When they first started installing narrowed rear ends, they had the Panhard bar that would go from a frame rail over to a bracket that stuck up, but they found that that steered the car too much if it bounced on the top end. So then they went to the track locator, which goes side to side, and now they go with the wishbone. Sometimes they put them on top of the housing, sometimes they're underneath, but mine will work out well underneath. And you can hook them both ways. Mine's going to be the wide bone in the back and the part that would snap if you were pulling on it with your friend, or be in the front. I'm talking wishbone, not the actual track locator that I make, or wishbone that I make. I was messing around with the fuel cell connection, and they did leave enough room for these are both -8 for a 90-degree fitting, and I believe I'm going to put the pump over here. I'm either going to run both of these into a Y, and the pump will be probably a 10 or a 12 inlet, or I'm half thinking maybe run 2 pumps and run that way I wouldn't have to run them both all the time. You know, street driving I could run on one. Have the second one come on either manually or automatically. So I'm still dreaming about that. Back here they ran a piece of 2x3 all the way across. This is where it was bolted to a rotisserie when they built it. And it had leaf springs at one time, which may also be the reason why they lined the frame rail up. So obviously they changed their plans along the way, because that's a leaf spring bracket. So I have this nice piece of 2x3, and my stock bumper brackets and stuff are not going to fit, but that's no big deal. But this is an excellent opportunity, because I do have the parachute for it, a parachute for it. I think I'm going to make it quick disconnect, so I could also, if I ever did do a drag week or something like that, I could pull the parachute off, throw it in the trunk, and slide a trailer hitch into the same spot, and it'll stick out through the license plate that flips down, you know, where the fuel fill should be. So I'm still dreaming of that also. Lots of planning going on today. I'm going to run some round, probably 1.25 inch tubing to triangulate the back side of that 2x3 tubing. And it'll also give me a spot to tie my fuel lines. Because if you've ever driven a car with a parachute, it does tug pretty hard initially. So I doubt I would bow that out, but it is pretty long. So more support. You can never have too much support. But I'm in the mood today to see this actually sitting on the ground. I've never seen it with the weight of the motor and transmission in it to see exactly how it's going to sit. So that's next. Let's put her on the ground and have a peek. I wish I could get back and get a better perspective on it, but the rear wheel well is slightly below the top of the wheel, which is perfect. I got about 4 inches on the oil pan, almost 5 to the cross member, about 4.5 to the oil pan. The front end still has a lot of weight to be added, so I expect it to drop a little more. Of course, with the coilovers, it's fully adjustable, but I want it to ride low. The overwhelming amount of stuff in my garage in the way makes it difficult, but yeah, that's perfect. I like it. The trunk came with a 15-gallon cell with a fuel sender and a spot for the rollover valve and a return, so that's going to work out. That's usable. Plenty of room for batteries or anything else. Somebody did a pretty fair job in this car. There's parts of it that I really love. This is all body dust. What roll cage it has is done, it's MIG welded, but it's a pretty nice job. That's why I kind of want to just add on to it. That lower bar is redundant and needs to go. It would have made a lot more sense to triangulate down to the top of the frame rail that's sitting right there. And I'll do that. So the upper one stays, the bottom one's got to be gone. And of course I got to run forward pillars and also out to the front. But yeah, here she is in the rough. Not that rough though, just dirty. I believe the original color was Placer Gold. A better look at the bell housing area. Then amazingly the shield fits. Not by much, but it fits. The LS should be easy to work on. I'm still not in love with the motor mounts, but it's where it needs to be, so I'll run them. I didn't have any idea the day I accidentally fried that 1/4 inch MPT to 3/16 flare adapter that they were so hard to find. I have some between here and there, but Weatherhead skips this size. I don't want to run an adapter. I'm going to run this junk. Or, if it frustrates me too much, I'll start over. But that's the way it goes. So I have a question for anybody watching that happens to be an LS Turbo expert. Everybody runs a catch can. I've already made a catch can. I'm going to mount it on the firewall right there if I run it. You run a hose from each valve cover to it. But before I went to a vacuum pump and I was drag racing, I had a breather on each valve cover or a connection. I had a check valve, which is 1/2 inch MPT, welded into the header collector, and the exhaust volume would suck out all the moisture and it would just get burned off. If I put a catch can there, the thing's breathing all the time. It's just going to be an oily mess, and it's going to collect water that I could just blow right out the exhaust and not have to worry about it. So why do people run a catch can when you could put a crankcase evacuation kit? You can look it up in the Moroso catalog. And I always ran just a Mopar style breather. It's got a 1/2 inch pipe nipple you weld into the exhaust, and you put it's a smog air pump check valve, just a one-way valve. So I'm thinking, I don't see anybody doing that, and I don't know why. So if you know why, let me know. One of the first things that got accomplished on this car, and I'm not sure why it happened the way it did, but I bought this gauge piece. It's just a piece of bent aluminum, and it gives you a pretty good view of the gauges. It's not perfect, but it's okay because your gauge would be up here and you're sitting down this way a little bit, so it would be okay. But a buddy of mine who moved away to North Carolina, and I'll never forgive him for it, but anyway, he loves working with plastic. So he put all this stuff. He's even got lights. You got parking lights or full lights, high and low on the wiper. A USB connector. More switches you can count. I got extras to put down here if I want to. These are the gauges that I'm going to put in the Model A, I think. And I have silver autometer gauges to fill in here that I picked up after the fact. I just stuck these in to see what it would look like, and they've lived here ever since for the last 4 or 5 years. But anyway, that's probably going to be the gauge cluster. Of course, everybody runs a Holley now, but I'm going to be old school and well, they're not analog. They're halfway in between. I think some are analog, some are digital, but it's cool anyway. Oh, hey, welcome back. That is a really brief tour of some of the immediate work that needs to be done. There's about 1,000 other things that I haven't even thought of or mentioned yet. But that's okay. It's not overwhelming at all. If I get sick of working on the back, I'll work on the front. If I'm not working on this project, I'll be working on another one. Projects are what drive me. If I finish these, I'll have to have more projects. It's my happiness. So, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm not sure where I'm headed next. I'm going to order some pieces for the wishbone that I want to make. I'm not going to buy a whole kit. I only need a few pieces, and I'll get the rest of them under the bench. And I got lots of work to do, so I'll just pick something and go with it. Catch you next time.